Hi, my name is Danny Strong, and I'm your host today for today's half hour with Being the Ricardos. And the guest is the great writer, director, one of the biggest legends in the Hollywood of the last, several decades, the incredible Aaron Sorkin, who has a tremendous film out right now that just got a bunch of Oscar nominations and has been nominated for everything under the sun, and a movie that I personally loved, Being the Ricardos. So, Aaron, why don't you give us a quick sort of overview of the film?
Sure, I will. But I just wanted to say that the incredible Danny Strong has had Dope Sick out for a while, which is amazing, and which itself is getting nominated for everything. Michael Keaton is fantastic. Danny, of course, your writing is amazing. Congratulations on Dope Sick.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. It means a lot coming from you.
So Being the Ricardos takes a look at one week in the life of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, one production week on I Love Lucy, Monday table read to Friday audience taping. It pops into flashbacks, but it takes place during a week when three pretty monumental things are happening in their lives at the same time. One, Lucille Ball was accused of being a communist, and it seemed pretty likely that she'd be literally canceled, that by Friday, I Love Lucy, the most successful television show ever, would be off the air, and you'd never hear from Lucille Ball or Desi Arnaz, any of those writers, ever again. Second was that Lucille Ball was pregnant, and you could not have a pregnant woman on television in 1952. In fact, CBS didn't even let them say the word pregnant out loud. That was a battle they had to fight all week. And the third was that there was a tabloid gossip magazine called Confidential, which had a picture of Desi on the cover with another woman and the headline, Desi's Wild Night Out, and the article inside which chronicled Desi's Wild Night Out with another woman, which Desi claims is all made up. So Lucy it's sort of by dealing with these points of friction that we get to learn a lot, I think, about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and it's kind of a fun ride along the way.
Yeah, the film's incredible. I've seen it 3 times, and you've made some of the great nonfiction films of the last 20 years, with Social Network, Moneyball, just to name a few. What brought you to and Trial of the Chicago 7, your last film that you also directed? Why Lucy and Desi? Why did you want to tackle this subject matter?
It took a little while for me to want to. It was in 2015 that our producer, Todd Black, asked to have a meeting with me, asked me if I was interested in writing about the relationship between Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. And I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. And he and I would meet once a month, once every couple of months after that. And he'd sort of load me up a little bit more with information about Lucy and Desi. At that first meeting, he said, "Did you know that Lucy was accused of being a communist?" And I hadn't. And I kind of asked around, was I the only one who didn't know that Lucy was accused of that? And then, as I said, these points of friction, not just between Lucy and Desi, but between Lucy and Vivian Vance, between Lucy and Jess Oppenheimer, the executive producer and showrunner on the show. And I got this idea in my head that there was an interesting structure to be had. If I really like claustrophobic spaces, claustrophobic periods of time, and if I could make this all happen in one production week, that I thought I had a chance of writing a good screenplay. It took me about 18 months to get from that first meeting to yes, but I'm very glad I said yes.
Yeah, as am I as well. Let's see the trailer. We have a trailer of the film.
Please welcome my wife, Lucille Ball!
Being the Ricardos is nominated for 3 Academy Awards,
Now we're cooking with gas.
including Best Actress Nicole Kidman,
I need you to help me save my marriage.
Best Actor Javier Bardem,
Lucy, I'm home.
and Best Supporting Actor J.K. Simmons.
Are you drunk?
It's 10 a.m., Vivian, so, of course.
Now, you just talked about the structure and how that was sort of your way into it. If you could do it over a 1-week period, you thought you could have something really interesting. There is a sort of, I think, special sauce or magic to this structure in that it takes place in a really short period of time. and then simultaneously spans over a 30-year, 40-year period. I'm not even sure how many years it is, but it goes over many, many years in which we get, how they met and their love story, and all of the trials and tribulations along their way for their career. How complicated was it to put something together that spanned so much time while also taking place over a period of time that was very small, and then us never feeling the sense that we were constantly going in and out of time?
It was. I thought that the trick was to make sure it was organized, so that we couldn't just go anywhere, anytime I wanted to. That each day of the week, and we delineate those days of the week with a card on the screen: Monday, table read; Tuesday, blocking rehearsal. That in each day of the week, I would carve out a moment to do a flashback. We're just going to tell the story now of, we see Desi and Lucy meet, have their first date, but we're just going to tell the story of how each of them brought to the relationship. These are two people who intensely in love with each other, supported each other, devoted to each other, respected each other, protected each other. There was an incredible sexual connection between the two of them. But they each brought to the relationship just a hairline fracture that was going to make the two of them exactly the wrong people for each other. I Love Lucy happened as an attempt by Lucy to save her marriage. And so we get to see that, and we kind of learn that at just the right time in the story that we're telling contemporaneously for it, hopefully, all to work at the end.
Yeah. Well, it's a real mastery of structure, the way it goes in and out. And I love that you had this exact principle that you just couldn't go anywhere at any time, but it was delineated within each day exactly when you would go back into time.
I like rules. I think it's rules that make things beautiful, whether it's, sports. If there were no rules in sports, you could just kind of grab the ball, shoot the other guy in the head, run down and throw it into the goal. It's rules that make a sport beautiful. I think it's rules that make art beautiful. Without rules, it's just finger painting. So you and I, we both start off with rules, obviously. We start off with the rules of drama that Aristotle laid out in 350 BC. But if I can give myself some extra rules, like we're going to have a flashback per day, that kind of thing, it helps me.
Well, if you're gonna bring up Aristotle, we got to give him a shout out. The book's called The Poetics. He really needs those royalties.
He really needs the royalties checks. The book is called The Poetics, and by the way, it's not even a book. It's more like a pamphlet. It's about 64 pages long. Read. But it contains the rules of drama. Okay, it defines drama, which has rules just like music does. A musician knows if you're in 4/4 time, there have to be 4 beats in a measure. There can't be 3. There can't be 5. If you're in the key of C major, there can't be any sharps. There can't be any flats. The rules are just as strict in drama. And if you're writing something and you're stuck, it's not going well, chances are you have broken one of those rules.
Now, since we're on the rules of drama, after Aristotle, are there any other influences that you find to be some of the most important to you?
I am influenced by almost everyone, including you, Danny.
Thanks, Aaron.
I've watched your stuff a bunch of times, so many times that chances are I will steal something from you without really knowing that I did it. It just felt like it was a part of me the whole time. And that's what I'll say in court.
It's deserved then, because I'm constantly stealing from you. So okay. It's only fair. Me much more stealing from you than vice versa.
That's very kind of you to say. I'm heavily influenced. A screenwriting, a lot of playwrights. Mamet. There was a playwright named Mark Medoff, whose most famous work is Children of a Lesser God, but he wrote some lesser known plays that really, like reading those, it kind of filled my fire to want to be a playwright. Tom Stoppard, certainly, and as far as screenwriters go, in my early 20s, when I was just starting out, I was taken under the wing of William Goldman.
Wow.
You are too young for Bill Goldman, but he's kind of considered the dean of American screenwriters. He passed away a few years ago, but he won Oscars for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men. He also wrote The Princess Bride and Marathon Man and many, many others, Misery. My early 20s, I had just written my first play, A Few Good Men. And he said, I think I can convert you into a screenwriter. And he never actually did. I'm still a playwright kind of faking his way through movies. But until he passed away, he was always the first person I gave pages to. I would recommend, I'm sure you've read Adventures in Screen Trade.
Sure.
I'd recommend that book to anyone, whether you want to write movies or not. It's just a great read. The only thing that's changed are the numbers. Just substituted higher numbers for everything, and everything that remains the same. But he was my biggest influence.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his rule number one, but a rule that he had that always stuck with me was it can never be boring.
Absolutely, it can never be boring. He also his most famous, most oft repeated line from Adventures in Screen Trade: "Nobody knows anything."
Yeah.
An important thing that he taught me is to never tell the audience something they already know, and to never make the audience have to wait and catch up for you. Again, they can't know more than you can't let them get ahead of you. And it's now that I've started directing, it is something that I'll mention to actors. If an actor has the line, "I can't stand it, I can't stand it," okay? And they say, "I can't stand it, I can't stand it." We got to stand it a second before he did, right? And that second for the audience feels like an hour and a half waiting for a bus. So that's just a silly example of don't tell the audience something they already know. The audience already knew how that line ends.
Yeah. Now you talked about being basically a playwright at heart, and you're faking your way as a screenwriter. How do you decide? Because you jump back and forth between movies, television, and theater. Mm-hmm. How do you decide what a piece is for you? If it's this is a play, this is a TV show, or this is a movie?
Sometimes it's decided for me. Look, when Todd Black comes and says, "Do you want to make a movie about Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball?" Yes, I could come back to him and say, "Listen, I've got really interested in this, but what I'm seeing is a terrific play. Will you let me write it as a play first, and you'll own the film rights?" I mean, we might be able to do something like that, but generally they want you to write a movie. If my rule usually is, if something can be a play, then it should be a play. And the reason why I say I'm a playwright faking his way through movies is I've only recently admitted that there is a visual element to cinema.
It sounds like it's still hard for you. Like you're still working through that.
Yes, it was a hard thing to say, but I have, with the help, I sought help. Okay. I got the help that I needed, Danny.
That's nice.
Okay,
that's nice.
And that's the trick. You got to ask for help. You got to know you have a problem. And I knew I had a problem when I wrote the last movie that Mike Nichols directed before he died. I wrote Charlie Wilson's War. By the way, I don't think those two things have anything to do with each other. I think they're separate events. And I remember discussing something with him. It was like in front of the entire crew, too. And I said, "Listen, my favorite version of this movie would be if we took the script, put it on a music stand, pointed a camera at it, and every 40 seconds had a white gloved hand come into the frame and turn the page. Okay? Just let the audience read the screenplay. They will then have what I wanted them to have." But then I started directing movies 3 movies ago, and I realized I was, of course, wrong about that. It tends to be about the language more than I don't have a lot of action sequences. In Chicago 7, there were those riot scenes. That was new for me. But until Chicago 7, that first movie, A Few Good Men, there's a scene where Tom Cruise is driving his car down the street in Washington. He pulls over at a newsstand, hops out, buys a copy of a magazine, gets back in his car, and drives off. And until Chicago 7, that was my action scene. The Being the Ricardos is beautiful to look at, thanks to the work of Jeff Cronenwith, our DP, John Huttman, our production designer, and Susan Lyle, our costume designer. They did incredible work, and they know me well, and they know where the gaps are in my talent.
Well, now that you've been directing over the years, you've worked with, a murderer's row of some of the greatest directors of all time, and certainly of these times with David Fincher and Mike Nichols and Rob Reiner, and the list kind of goes on and on.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific sort of words of wisdom from them that they bestowed on you, as a writer, and then now as an extremely accomplished director, that's sort of stuck with you as a director?
Yeah, sure. David Fincher, particularly during The Social Network, he's a wonderful guy. I really love him. And I should mention, by the way, I'm not done wanting to work with great directors. If the phone rang and Fincher called and said, I'd be there in a second. But while we were making The Social Network, he seemed certain that I would be directing a movie soon, even though I was saying, no, that's not something I'm going to do. And he seemed confident that I was going to be good at it, and he seemed interested in telling me and saying things like, okay, when you direct, you're going to want to, that kind of thing. And even now, I show him early cuts and talking about things. But the thing about trying to learn from David is, I think his IQ is too high for me. Because I'll hang on every word and find that at the end of the conversation, I didn't quite understand what he was saying.
Interesting. And then what happens? You just
fake it? Here's what doesn't happen.
Okay.
I do not try to do a David Fincher impersonation. Okay, I won't be good at it. I don't try to do a David Fincher impersonation.
So now with Being the Ricardos, were there any specific challenges that went with portraying two American icons, as far as the writing specifically?
Once I start the writing, whether it's the Arnaz, Mr. and Mrs. Arnaz, or Mark Zuckerberg, or Steve Jobs, I'm talking about when it's nonfiction.
Sure.
Once I start writing, I'm done with the research process, and I've spent however many months it took pacing around, climbing the walls, the agony part of it, trying to come up with, what is this about? What does it look like? What's the structure? And then, how does this movie start? What happens on page one? I want to know what the first scene is, and the second scene, and maybe have a little bit of an idea of the third scene. But it's kind of like walking at night in the woods with a flashlight, walking forward. You can only see as far ahead as the flashlight beam will go, but the further you get into the woods, the further you can see. Once I've done all of that whole long thing that I just said, it's time to leave the real people behind and make them characters. Okay? And we don't have time to get into this part of it, but I'm going to say something that'll make some people slap their foreheads. The properties of people and the properties of characters have almost nothing in common. Okay? Characters are different things from people. People don't speak in dialogue. People's lives don't lay out in a series of scenes that form a narrative. Dramatists do that with characters. So while I would never defame anyone, I'm more interested in truth than accuracy. And again, I know that sounds like bullshit, frankly. What did you just say? It sounds like you believe in lying. But here's what I mean. Since we were talking about The Social Network, okay? There's a very simple scene, but it's a good example of what I'm talking about. The first scene in The Social Network, Jesse Eisenberg has a bad date with Rooney Mara, right? He's obnoxious. It doesn't go well. She doesn't want anything to do with him. He goes back to his dorm room and he starts live blogging. That he's going to hack into these different dorms or houses, hacking into the student directories on the Harvard campus. And I had his blog from that night, in which he says that he's drinking and he's drunk. Okay? So what I wrote was that he comes into his room, we're on the computer screen. He walks through the frame and powers the computer up, walks out of the frame, comes back into the frame, a glass goes down on his desk, ice goes into the glass, vodka goes into the glass, orange juice goes into the glass. All the while we're hearing in voiceover his exact blog post from that night. The only thing I did was change the young woman's name. About 2 weeks before shooting started, we found out that he was drinking beer that night, Beck's to be exact. So Fincher said, Aaron, we've got to change it to beer, Beck's to be exact. And I argued that we shouldn't, because it's not just that making a screwdriver is more visually interesting than opening a bottle of beer. It's that opening a bottle of beer doesn't necessarily read as drinking to get drunk. It can just be a college kid on a Tuesday night when it's hot who's thirsty and he's drinking a beer. It was important that he was drunk at that moment. So that is a case in which accuracy actually obscured the truth. David won the argument, by the way, and it was beer in the scene. Mm-hmm. But I, to this day, maintain that he was wrong because we were accurate, but we obscured the truth. The important truth was that he was drunk. I would not have him do a line of cocaine. That's entirely different. Yeah. And that is defaming him. But I don't have a problem making the kind of change that I just described. It's a painting. It's not a photograph. And so you asked me, the question that I'm sure you regret asking now because you got a 15-minute answer was, how do I deal with these iconic characters? I pull the plug on their iconicness, and they are characters and they're mine.
I love that line. It's a painting, not a photograph. In fact, I love it so much. I use it all the time in interviews, but I do quote you. I always say this is from the great Aaron Sorkin. Says it's a painting, not a photograph. So,
God, whatever I plagiarize from you, I never credit you.
Nor should you. So so let us now do our next clip from the film Being the Ricardos.
You're not telling these people that I checked the wrong box.
This is a critical moment, Lucy.
If I'm gonna die,
You're not.
I would rather die standing up.
I don't have any idea what
I'm
that
not
is.
an idiot. I didn't check the wrong box.
You saw the headline.
You can see the headline from outer space.
Then please.
Grandpa Fred raised me for when I was age 4. He cared about the little guy. He cared about workers' rights. It was a tribute to him. And to say that I checked
Grandpa
wrong...
Grandpa Fred was wrong, Lucy. Yes, he didn't tell you the part where they throw your father in prison for the crime of being the mayor of a city. I was chased to this country, Lucy. Believe me, you checked the wrong box.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why those two get nominated for Oscars for Best Actor and Best Actress for Being Ricardos.
Yeah.
I loved working with those two so much. They are just world-class actors who, now listen, talk about having to be nervous because you're dealing with icons. Javier, Nicole, they're two actors who could very easily rest on their laurels, not take risks. But for the both of them, I'd say Nicole especially, it took a lot of courage to play these parts, and they were fantastic. And we just had a great time. I mean, we shot it during COVID, and there were no problems.
Yeah, that's amazing that you shot this whole film during COVID.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about your process. You talked about, I think you said something along the lines of, the first scene, the second scene, maybe the third scene. Mm-hmm. And then what do? Do you just keep writing? You keep going? And then tell me about the rewriting process once you've completed your first draft.
Well, what I do is I get to the end. I don't stop at page 40 and go back and say, I'm going to start this again. I get to fade out. Okay. By the time I get to fade out, I know a lot more about the movie than I did at the beginning. And so now I will go back to the beginning, write it all over again, cutting the things that didn't add up to anything, that are just getting in the way, hanging a lantern on the things that that the movie is about. It was, I guess it was about halfway through writing that I realized, I knew from the beginning that Lucy longed for domesticity, yearned for domesticity. And it was just driving around that I was tickled by the irony that the most iconic line of dialogue from the most iconic television show ever was "Lucy, I'm home." And I kind of got the same look on my face that Nicole gets on hers when the irony strikes her when the cameras are running. But that's it took that long to find the end of the movie. So I just keep going forward, a few index cards at a time. And after a while, you can, 2 or 3 index cards turns into 4 or 5 at a time, 5 and 6 at a time. And then that, like I said, that great moment when you know what the ending is, and you can now, everything is about setting the table for that ending. You can go back to the beginning and load us up so that the end of the film pays off.
So when you say a few index cards at a time, are you writing scenes and then putting index cards for future scenes? Are you doing all the index cards first and then writing scenes? What's the order?
Never. I've never known the whole movie, so there's never been all the index cards first. Mm-hmm. If I'll put the first 3 index cards up there because that's as far as I can go. Or maybe I have an idea about 4 and 5, but I don't want to put them up there yet because by the time I get done writing 1, 2, 3, I might have a different feeling about 4 and 5. So that's it. I basically, I'll write to where I know, and then take a breath. Okay, this has to happen, and then this has to happen. It's like that. Mm-hmm. And then but I would say to any writers who are listening, it is different for every writer. So if what works for you is standing on your head and chewing bubblegum, do that. There's no wrong way to get at this. My strong recommendation, though, would be don't stop till you get to the end.
Yeah. I'll say I do the same thing. When I write my first draft, I go all the way through and I won't look at a word of it till I get all the way to the end.
Right.
Or you could get just stuck in the weeds for eternity.
That's right.
So what about scene by scene? When you're starting to write a new scene for the first time, is there any kind of guiding principle you have that follows you, through each scene, or tell me about that process?
My guiding principle is intention and obstacle. Okay, which Aristotle talks a lot about. Yes, in the Poetics, intention and obstacle. Somebody wants something standing in their way of getting it. Okay, they want the money, they want the guy, they want to get to Philadelphia. It doesn't matter as long as it's important to them and that we can make it that importance feel important to the audience. And the obstacle that's in front of them has to be formidable. The tactics that your protagonist uses to overcome that obstacle, that's going to tell you everything you need to know about the character. So my guiding principle is intention and obstacle. My guiding principle is don't tell the audience who a character is. Show the audience what a character wants.
With intention and obstacle, the ultimate example of that is in R-rated comedies.
R-rated comedies, you can learn a lot from. Be a diagnostician, have some fun, watch R-rated comedies. That's right. Because here's what they're going to do in an R-rated comedy. There will be the inciting action. Okay, what they're going to tear down the fraternity house. Well, we've got to have one last great party before they tear this house down on Sunday, right? So now we know what the intention is. And the rest of the movie is going to be spent with our guys, with Jonah Hill and I worked with Tatum. Super bad. Okay. Michael Cera, thanks.
There you go.
Trying to get to the party, right? Mm-hmm. Or the two, this is terrible. I love these two actresses, Deaver and Jonah Hill's sister.
Beanie Feldstein.
Thank you. In Booksmart. Booksmart. Great example. Okay? So Beanie Feldstein, the inciting action is Beanie Feldstein discovers that all the people she thought were just goof-offs actually got into great colleges and had big futures coming up. And so they wasted their time for 4 years. They were being really great students, and it was all for nothing because they could have had fun and go to a party. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to go to tonight's party and we're going to make up for those 4 years. We're going to have a great time. And the writers of R-rated comedy know that structure has to be super solid because all they want to do is write the jokes, right? That's why they're writing this movie, to get to the jokes. Every joke is going to depend on a really strong clothesline of structure. We have to get to this party, right? Because if we don't, it'll have wasted 4 years of, we have to get to this party, and why can't we find it? Because this guy's thing didn't have it all. The logic has to be there, and it's all intention and obstacle. And they follow Aristotle's parts of drama to the T. It reminds me of great playwright Lanford Wilson, passed away, but he was going through a terrible bout of writer's block that lasted around 3 years. And he was drinking a lot of wine at the time. And he went to a place that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, called the Drama Bookshop. It used to be on like 47th and 7th, but it was great. It was just this shack on the second floor of something, but it had every play ever published, and you could go there and just read. And I went there a lot when I didn't have any money and just read. And Lanford Wilson went there, and he went to like the how to write a play section. This is a guy who had won 5 Tony Awards already for best play, and he bought the cheesiest how to write a play book that they had, and he said, I'm just going to do whatever this guy tells me to do, okay? And he opens it up, and on the first page it said, tell the audience what they're going to see, show it to them, tell the audience what they just saw. Now, you and I might think that's pretty... that advice is very useful.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that book.
But he wrote, based on that instruction, he wrote Tally's Folly and won the Pulitzer Prize for it. Tally's Folly begins with one of the actors saying to the audience, okay, this is a love story, and here's what's going to happen. Sally's going to enter from over there. I have 90 minutes to get her to marry me. She's not going to want to because of this. So it tells the audience what they're going to see. Then they do the play. It's 90 minutes. And he turns to the audience and says, all's well that ends, right on the button.
Yeah.
And
Hamilton basically does that with the opening number.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a part of Hamilton. So I guess one of the big lessons we have here is read Aristotle's The Poetics and watch all the Porky's movies. And then you'll know everything you need to know.
Probably. I have actually never seen a Porky's movie, so I don't want to send you there. Chances are. You know what? You might as well watch one. That's good. Watch Booksmart. Okay? Watch Booksmart, watch Superbad, and you will, and if you want, I'll come to your house while you're watching it. And I will pause when we get to an Aristotle moment. You'll be able to track it.
So what is the one thing that comes to mind that you would say to someone to make them watch the film Being the Ricardos?
I think you're going to have what Lily Tomlin calls the goosebump experience. When you think of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, really what you're thinking of are Lucy and Ricardo. Just like when you think of Charlie Chaplin, really what you're thinking of is The Little Tramp. And these two people were nothing like those two people. So it's an interesting contrast. And honestly, the real reason I would send someone to Being the Ricardos, those 4 performances, Nicole Kidman, Javier Bardem, J.K. Simmons, and Nina Arianda.
And I'll throw in that people should go see Being the Ricardos because it's fucking fantastic. It's a terrific film, and they're going to love it. So, Aaron, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.
A lot of fun for me. I really appreciate it, Danny. And no kidding, knock 'em dead with Dopesick.
Oh, thank you, my friend. And take care.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.